I found a hidden room in my basement, and the letters inside changed everything I knew about my family. I bought my house 3 years ago. It's an old 2-story place in Maryland, built in 1912, with warped wooden floors and a basement that always smelled faintly of dust and mildew no matter how often I cleaned it. It had character, as my realtor put it, which really meant it had problems. But it was mine. After a decade of renting cramped apartments, I finally had space. Until last month, the basement was just a storage spot, boxes from college, unused furniture, Christmas decorations. I never spent more time down there than I had to. But one Saturday, I decided to finally reorganize it. I figured I'd donate what I didn't need. That's when I noticed something odd. At the far end of the basement, behind a row of heavy shelving units I hadn't moved since I bought the place, there was a narrow section of wall that looked wrong. The concrete was a slightly different shade, and the paint had fewer cracks than the rest of the basement. I might have ignored it, except the shelving was awkwardly placed in front of it, almost as if it was hiding something. It took me nearly an hour to unload all the boxes and slide the shelves away. When I knocked on the wall, it sounded hollow. My pulse quickened. I grabbed a hammer and gently tapped along the seam. That's when a chunk of plaster broke away, revealing a small wooden door. It wasn't a normal basement door, it was barely 3 feet tall, with an old brass latch that had rusted over. I had to kneel to open it, and when I did, a stale, heavy smell rushed out, like paper, dust, and something else I couldn't place. I shone my phone's flashlight inside. It was a narrow crawlspace, maybe 4 feet wide and 10 feet long. The walls were lined with shelves, and on them were stacks of boxes. Everything was coated in a thick layer of dust, and spiderwebs clung to the corners. I had never seen this in any of the house's blueprints or inspections. I slid inside, crouched awkwardly, and pulled down the first box. Inside were dozens of envelopes, all tied neatly with twine. Each one had a date on the front, most from the late 1970s and early 80s, and a name, Talila. The handwriting was precise, almost delicate. I untied the first bundle and opened one letter. Lila. I saw you again through the window today. You were wearing the blue dress, the one I told you I liked. You didn't notice me, but I noticed you. I always do. I wish I could knock on your door, but you told me not to. Still, I'm close. Always close. J. A chill ran down my spine. The next letter was the same, strange, obsessive, and unsettling. They weren't love letters. They were surveillance. Someone had been watching this woman, writing about her daily activities, the clothes she wore, even the people she spoke to. By the 5th letter, I realized it wasn't just a week or two, it was years of this. I found a small tin box in the corner of the room. Inside were photographs, candid shots of a young woman with dark hair, smiling in a garden, walking down the street, reading on a porch. None looked posed. In every one, she seemed unaware she was being photographed. The last photo in the stack made my stomach twist. It was of her sleeping in a bed, taken from inside the room. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I called the woman who sold me the house, an older lady named Mrs. Calder. She'd inherited the place from her brother when he died. When I asked her if she knew anything about the crawlspace, she got quiet. I told the inspector everything that was relevant, she said after a pause. You bought the house as is. I'm not talking about the foundation, I said. I found letters down there. Photos. Someone was watching a woman named Lila. Another long pause. Then she said, you should throw those away. Don't get involved. And she hung up. That only made me more determined. I went to the county records office and dug into the property history. In 1976, the house had been rented by a man named James Calder, Mrs. Calder's brother. In 1982, there was a police report filed from this address, but the document was sealed. That's when I realized something. I'd seen Lila before. Not in real life, but in one of the framed photos hanging in my own hallway when I bought the house. It was mixed in with generic, vintage decor the realtor had left. I thought it was just a stock image. Now I wasn't so sure. I took the photo off the wall. On the back, faint pencil writing read, Lila, Summer 79. The more I read through the letters, the worse it got. The writer, James, I assumed, became increasingly unstable. He talked about how Lila belonged to him, how her boyfriend was in the way, how he could fix it. The final letter was dated March 3, 1982. Lila. I can't watch from afar anymore. I'm coming tonight. I'll make you understand. That was the last one. I don't know what happened that night, the police file is sealed, and no one in town will talk about it. But I do know that after reading that letter, I started hearing noises in my house. Not creaks or settling wood, footsteps. 2 nights ago, I woke up to find that the box of letters I'd left on my dining table was gone. This morning, there was a new envelope sitting where the box had been. It was in the same handwriting. I see you, too. I didn't sleep the night I found that envelope. I sat in my kitchen with every light in the house on, clutching my phone and staring at the 3 words over and over. I see you, too. The handwriting was identical to the ones from the crawlspace, same delicate curves, same precise loops. I knew James Calder had been dead for decades, but it felt impossible that this was a coincidence. At 4:17 a.m., I finally grabbed my keys and drove to the police station. The officer at the front desk barely looked up when I explained that someone had been in my house. Was anything stolen? He asked. Yes. A box of letters, I said. And they left me one back. He sighed. Sir, without proof of forced entry or evidence of a threat. They were in my house, I snapped. That's the threat. I left after filling out a suspicious activity report, knowing it would end up in some forgotten drawer. That morning, I went back to the county archives. I wasn't leaving without finding out what happened in 1982. The clerk at the records desk, a thin man in his 60s, hesitated when I gave him the address. That file's sealed, he said. I know, I said. Is there any way to unseal it? He gave me a long, uncomfortable look before leaning in. I can't open the file for you. But if you were to look up the local paper from March 82, well, not everything gets redacted. It took me less than 20 minutes to find it. On page 3 of the March 4, 1982 edition of the Carroll County Times, there was a short article. Local woman missing. Lila Hart, 27, was reported missing last night from her home on Maple Street. Neighbors say they saw a man matching the description of James Calder near the property earlier that evening. Calder, 34, is currently wanted for questioning. Police declined to comment further. There was no follow-up story. No case closed or body found. Just silence after that. Back home, I couldn't stop thinking about the crawlspace. I crawled back inside, this time searching the shelves more thoroughly. In the far corner, wedged between the wall and a stack of old newspapers, I found a small metal key. It was rusted, but the number 13 was engraved on it. I didn't know what it opened. Until I remembered that my basement had an old storage locker door built into the far wall, bolted shut when I moved in. I'd always assumed it was just part of the foundation. The key fit perfectly. Inside was a single wooden crate. When I pried it open, the smell hit me first, stale, almost metallic. Inside were more photographs, and something else. A woman's blue dress. Even through the dust, I recognized it instantly from the first letter I'd read. That night, I called Mrs. Calder again. I told her about the dress. There was a long silence, then she whispered, I told him to get rid of it. He said he would. You knew. I said, my voice shaking. I didn't know what happened, she said quickly. He called me that night, said he'd made a mistake, that she was gone and he didn't know what to do. He begged me to help him. I was scared. You helped hide this? She hung up without another word. Over the next few days, I started feeling watched. My curtains would be open when I was certain I'd closed them. My back gate, which I never used, would be unlocked. On the fifth night, I heard something move in the basement. I grabbed the baseball bat I keep by my bed and crept downstairs. The crawlspace door was open. And inside, on the dusty floor, was the missing box of letters. On top of it was another envelope. My hands shook as I opened it. You're closer than you think. Don't make the same mistake she did. I called the police again. This time, they sent a patrol car. The officers searched the basement, the crawlspace, the yard, nothing. They suggested I install security cameras, for peace of mind. I ordered a full set that night and installed them myself. Every entry point, every hallway, the basement. On the third night of footage, I saw him. At 3:14 a.m., a tall man in a dark coat slipped in through the back door, no signs of forcing it, almost like he had a key. He walked straight to the basement, crouched into the crawlspace, and stayed there for almost 20 minutes before leaving the way he came. I froze the frame on his face as he glanced up at one of the cameras. He looked exactly like James Calder. I know what you're thinking, impossible. But the resemblance was uncanny, same sharp jawline, same narrow eyes. And yet James would be in his 70s by now. Unless. I went back to the newspaper archives. Lila Hart had no surviving family, according to her original missing person report, except for one younger brother who'd moved out of state in 1975. His name, Jonathan Hart. The police never mentioned him. The town never mentioned him. But in several of the later letters, the writer had signed not as J, but as John. It's been 4 days since I saw the footage. I haven't gone to the police again. Yesterday morning, I woke up to find my security cameras disconnected. And this time, the envelope wasn't on the dining table. It was on my pillow. You should have stayed out of it. I didn't move for nearly an hour after finding the envelope on my pillow. I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at it, the words vibrating in my skull. You should have stayed out of it. It wasn't just the message, it was the fact that someone had been in my bedroom while I slept. They'd been close enough to reach over my head. I realized, with a sickening drop in my stomach, that this wasn't just about Lila anymore. This was about me. I called the police again. This time, I didn't ask for a patrol car. I demanded a detective. The dispatcher told me someone would follow up. I knew what that meant, another note in a forgotten file. So I decided to handle it myself. I still had the security footage from before the cameras were disconnected, and I noticed something in the clip with John. When he left the basement, he slipped something into his coat pocket. I zoomed in, it was the tin box of photos. If I could figure out where he went after leaving, I could find him. I drove around my neighborhood for hours, scanning every street for anyone who looked like him. Nothing. But late that night, I had an idea. If John had a key, it meant he either lived nearby or had access through someone who did. The next morning, I went door to door on my street, pretending to be a census worker. Most people were polite. A few slammed the door in my face. But one woman, 2 houses down, mentioned something that made my skin crawl. Oh, the tall guy. Yeah, he comes and goes at night. Doesn't live here though, stays with that old man on the corner sometimes. They're related, I think. She didn't know his name. That night, I parked my car a block away from the old man's house and waited. At 2:46 a.m., I saw him, the same man from the footage, walking up the driveway, carrying a bag. I followed at a distance. He went around the back and slipped inside. No lights came on. I waited an hour before creeping up to the house. The back door was unlocked. I stepped inside, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would give me away. The place smelled like mothballs and something sour. The walls were lined with yellowed wallpaper, and the floor creaked under every step. I moved slowly, listening. From somewhere deeper in the house came a faint sound, like shuffling papers. I found him in the dining room. He was sitting at the table, the tin box open in front of him, sorting through the photographs one by one. Up close, I could see the lines in his face, older than I'd thought, maybe late 50s or early 60s, but the resemblance to James Calder was undeniable. "John," I said before I could stop myself. His head snapped up. His eyes were cold. "You shouldn't be here," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "I want to know what happened to Lila." He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled, a slow, unsettling curve of his lips. "She's still here," he said. My mouth went dry. "What does that mean?" John stood, closing the tin box. "You know, I used to think my brother was weak," he said. He watched, but he never acted. "I'm not like him." He stepped toward me, and I took a step back. "You've been looking where you shouldn't," he continued. "That's dangerous. Lila learned that." "Is she dead?" I asked, my voice shaking. He tilted his head, almost pitying. "Some people are kept. Not gone. Just kept." Before I could react, there was a sound from the hallway, soft, deliberate footsteps. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was a woman. Her hair was long but unkempt, streaked with gray. She wore a faded blue dress, the dress. Her eyes darted between me and John, wide and vacant, like she didn't fully understand where she was. "Lila," I whispered. She flinched at her name, backing against the wall. "She doesn't talk much anymore," John said, almost proudly. "Too many years down there. Safer that way." My stomach turned. I bolted. I didn't think, I just ran. Out the back door, down the driveway, into my car. I didn't stop driving until I was halfway across the county. I called the police from a gas station, shaking so badly I dropped my phone twice. I told them everything, the house, John, Lila. They promised to send units immediately. Hours later, an officer called me back. They found the house. It was empty. No John. No Lila. No tin box. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, I've been staying in motels, moving every couple of days. I put my house up for sale, though part of me doubts I'll live long enough to close the deal. Because last night, under the door of my motel room, someone slid an envelope. Inside was a single photograph. It was me, asleep in bed. And written on the back, in that same delicate handwriting. "You can't run forever. It's been 6 months. I sold the house, quit my job, and moved 3 states away. I changed my phone number, my email, even dyed my hair. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally outrun him. Yesterday, I checked my mailbox for the first time in weeks. Inside was a single padded envelope with no return address. When I opened it, my hands started shaking. It was the tin box. On top of the photos, there was a fresh letter. New place suits you. See you soon. I looked up from the page, and across the street, leaning against a lamppost, was a tall man in a dark coat. He smiled. I didn't think. I ran back inside, slammed the door, and locked every bolt. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely hold the phone. 911. The dispatcher answered, but before I could speak, the line went dead. My phone screen was black, no signal. A slow, deliberate knock echoed from the front door. 3 times. I didn't move. Another knock, this time from the back door. Then from the side window. It was like he was everywhere at once. When I finally forced myself to peek through the blinds, the street was empty. No man, no car. Just quiet. But on my porch, taped to the door, was a new photograph. It was me, standing at the window, holding the blinds open. Face to face. I knew running wasn't going to work anymore. That night, I packed a bag, slipped my kitchen knife into my jacket pocket, and waited. If he was watching me, and I knew he was, I wanted him to see I wasn't afraid. Around 2 a.m., I heard the floorboard creak in the hallway. Not outside. Inside. I stepped into the living room. He was there. Tall, dark coat, the faint smell of damp earth clinging to him. His expression was calm, almost friendly. "You've made this harder than it needed to be," he said softly. "Where's Lila?" I asked, tightening my grip on the knife. His eyes flicked to the blade and back to my face. He smiled. "Closer than you think." Before I could move, the bedroom door behind me opened. Lila stepped out. Only now, she didn't look vacant, she looked alert. Focused. And she was holding a knife of her own. "She's with me," he said. "Always has been." Lila's eyes locked on mine. "You should have stayed out of it," she whispered. Then they both stepped forward. I backed toward the kitchen, both of them closing in. My mind was screaming fight or die. When John lunged, I sidestepped, slamming the knife into his side. He stumbled, but Lila came at me fast, faster than I expected. We crashed into the counter. My hand found the heavy cast-iron skillet, and I swung. The sound was sickening. She dropped instantly. John was still moving, blood soaking his coat. He gave me a look, not of pain, but of fury. "This isn't over," he rasped, before staggering toward the back door and disappearing into the night. I stood there, chest heaving, staring at Lila's unmoving body on the floor. When the police arrived minutes later, the kitchen was empty. No Lila. No blood. No sign anyone had ever been there. Just the tin box, sitting neatly on the counter. With a fresh photo inside. Me, asleep.